Thank you, Brother Maurice Mahan. I'd like to thank our Senior Vice President, Reverend Todd Yearing, Reverend Jeanette Wilson. I'd like to thank the pastor of this fabulous church, Reverend Edie, my friend, and the spirit of the Church of God in Christ. I just want to be a soldier in the army of the Lord. I know there are a lot of good church songs out there now, but how magnanimous it is to be a soldier in the army of the Lord. That is the Church of God in Christ. As we see the symbol of the wheat wrapped around with the cord, with the rain coming behind it, that's the spirit of the Church of God in Christ. We remember Reverend Martin Luther King gave his last sermon at a Church of God in Christ edifice in Memphis, Tennessee. We are here today on the west side, as our treasurer has shared with us, the best side. We love the west side. Reverend Martin Luther King came through the west side. We remember in this year the 50th anniversary of the killing, the assassination of Brother Fred Hampton. We will not forget the west side. We're honored that we have our congressman living and with us today in our presence, the Honorable Dr. Bobby Rush, who survived that assassination attempt, and we thank God for you. I see my friend and partner, my good commissioner. That's you, Brandon Johnson. I want to thank you for your leadership on the county board, in the teachers union, and for having always been connected to the roots and the community and never having strayed from that path. I see today we also have a very special guest. We have the family, the mother of young Tamir Rice, a child that was killed in Cleveland, a child playing with a toy gun. Toy guns are advertised every day, everywhere. This young child was simply playing. And what was it in this officer's mind that showed up with the intent to kill? Ms. Rice, we don't know the depth of your pain, and you are in our prayers constantly. And for all those other children and all those other mothers that face that same tragic ordeal, we thank God for you for coming out, standing up, and not turning that pain into something negative, but turning it into power. You're going to give other mothers the strength now to fight on and stand up. And that same officer that killed her child has now been rehired by another police department. Don't stop. I want to thank the Rainbow Push staff. We drove back last night from Detroit, had a very successful automotive concert convention there. And my remarks today will be brief. And I just want you to know that I was thinking all along when we were driving and the driver had on his GPS. And I was thinking of all the benefits of the technology of GPS. And you know it as the global positioning system. But as we drove, and I don't like driving in cars at night as I've gotten older, and I certainly don't like driving on the road at night if I don't have my hands on the wheel. It's just become a thing of mine recently. But there's a God positioning in the solar system that even guides over the global positioning system. And what did I see in the automotive concert that I think convention that's important for us today? My father, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, was planted here in Chicago by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King for voting rights and equity and for our economic rights and prosperity. God does not want to see us in this lowly, down, drudge position. I want to thank the choir from Sweden. My God, aren't they fabulous? They lift our spirits up, and we've just gotten over this teacher strike. And I want to thank the mayor who honorably came forward and offered a generous package. And I want to thank the teachers who sacrificed and raised their voices and came forward. Ladies and gentlemen, that's part one. Now we've got a police contract where 85% of the murders aren't solved. Now we've got a fire contract where we don't have our fair representation of men and women on the force. So if you missed the teachers union's march, You have another opportunity with the fire department. You're going to have another one with the police department. And I hope you feel like you can be counted on by the Lord to be a soldier in his army. What am I saying about this global positioning system? It's hard for us sometimes to see the big picture. We get so caught up on these little screens, and they're creating eye issues. There's a red eye syndrome now in schools where the children have watched screens so much at night, they're waking up tired in the morning. You got to say that twice. They wake up tired. It used to be called an oxymoron, but let me move on. They wake up tired because they've been watching the screens all night. And they'll have their headsets on, and they'll look at the light, but not look at the cars that are crossing, putting their lives in danger. But I need you to see not only the screen that can show you feet at which you have to make a left and a right turn. Far too often, many of us aren't looking up to see the street sign. How many people drive today don't know north from south, east from west? They're just driving, following a dot, following something on the map. Traffic is straight ahead, and they run straight into the traffic. They don't know the alternative routes. They don't know the other roads. They don't know when to turn the system off and go into an override that God's in control. I don't need you just to look at the screen, and I just don't need you to see the map. I need you to understand the globe and the whole world my father told me about. What did we see in the automotive conference, and why was Rainbow Push in Detroit? And I want to thank our chairman, John Graves, for his outstanding leadership. Hello, the Honorable Miss Dorothy Brown. Always have to acknowledge her. Our children need jobs. Our children need entrepreneurship. We also need capitalization in order to run our businesses. For every dollar that the white community has in America, African Americans have less than 10 cents. There are over 18,000 automotive dealerships in the United States of America, and African Americans have 269. 18,000 dealerships in the United States of America, and African American, Reverend Edie, have less than 269. Why is that important for us to know? Because when you hear about an auto ad on the radio, when you hear about an auto ad on the cable show, when you hear about an auto ad sponsoring a television program, people are able to get the dollars of their consumer to be able to promote their own messages in meeting. Our media dies because we don't have access to businesses that can sponsor our programming. But look at the other side. We buy the cars. We spend the money. We just don't receive any of the benefits outside of the ride. My father, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, shared with automobile executives and some African Americans yesterday. He does not accept the racist premise that all of these territories and dealerships were granted during a time of racism in American history that excluded us. When he went to negotiate with General Motors and says, why is there no Cadillac dealership in Harlem? And they said, you know, Reverend Jackson, that's a great point. We should open the market. We should have sales and service points and distributions in Harlem, New York City. Now, for those that aren't familiar, that is a strong demographic of African Americans. In Harlem, once they agreed to put the point there, lo and behold, a white family had to own the dealership for Cadillacs to be sold in Harlem. And he said, well, why is that? Why can't this point bring about new opportunities for African Americans? They said, well, those territories were sold off 70 years ago. The Potamki family owns the right. And we went to see them. Mr. Potamki says, my granddaughter has the rights to sell Cadillacs in Harlem. Why do we care about automotive? with 18,000 dealerships across the United States. Combined, over $995 billion of revenue goes through dealerships. Dealerships hire mechanics. Dealerships hire salespersons. Dealerships have to have ad and marketing in order to promote the sales of their products. So when we drive through the West Side today, that's why we're here. And there's no African American that owns a dealership. And we drive on the West Side, through the West Side, around the West Side, but we can't sell a car and service it on the West Side. That's a problem, ladies and gentlemen. Why do I want you to care about this? Because you're doing so many things right. You've sacrificed, you've saved, you've taken the loans out, you put your children through school. Our children are doing the right things. And after they finish, they're unemployed. I don't want you to be upset in May. I want a fire lit underneath your behind today, and you ought to stay upset about it. I know your children are telling you some things you don't quite understand on Facebook, on Snapchat, on LinkedIn, on Vimeo, on how they're doing their resume, how they're spending all this time communicating, outreaching, networking, going to conferences, and at the end of the day, they're unemployed and broke. That's a problem. They did everything right. But here's what they've done wrong. They're looking at the navigation. They're looking at this little bitty phone and this little bitty screen. They're not looking at the map. And they don't have a perspective on the world. When the deal was set up, they were excluded and cut out. You need to turn the phone off. Turn it upside down. You need to open your eyes. Pick up your head. You need to get involved in community. We need collective action to open doors like the rainbow. Worldwide automotive technologies, R&D, research and development, is over $108 billion that's spent annually. 83 million cars were sold and shipped worldwide last year. America consumed 17 million cars last year. We over-index on all of these, and we don't have the right to sell a car. When you see the football game and you see us on the field like gladiators for all the big schools and all the coaches and all the dealerships, I want you to look beyond that field for one moment and see what I see. I want you to see the band that's rocking and having a good time in uniforms and those children out there singing. Well, guess what? They have athletic scholarships for orchestra and for music. Those are music scholarships. I want you to see when a player goes down and all the people come around there. Those are sports scholarships. The people that want to get in sports medicine and sports management. Do you see our children running out to aid another one of their classmates and players? I want you to go back and look at all the other things that are around there. There are scholarships. We just can't make all the revenue and not have any of the benefits, ladies and gentlemen. Now, this is the sort of message that disturbs some people. So be it. I want you disturbed. And this is the message that should comfort some others, because you got to have some fight. Look at the work that Mr. Brandon Johnson has been doing. This problem did not start with Mayor Lightfoot. But where were you when Rahm Emanuel closed 50 schools? This problem did not start with Mayor Lightfoot. Where were you when Mayor Daley diverted the money for the teachers' pension and didn't fund their pensions properly? Where were you, you hypocrite? Fire department, Mayor Daley took your money. It's hard times for everyone. We're going to have to tighten our belts, and it's going to be a sacrifice. But you know what? I'm excited about it. I wasn't born for a weak period of time. I like a tough time and a tough fight. And I'm just looking for a few strong people that wake up with some righteous indignation that want to stand up and be a part of something good and great. Why did we go to Detroit to be a part of an automotive summit? I'm going to put a few of these pieces together and I'm going to close. FAMU. I saw my brother Teddy Gilmore sitting up here, and he's been so kind, and his wife, to sponsor our students to go on historically black college tours. And FAMU beat North Carolina A&T State University in football. I'm not going to stay on that because I went to A&T. And that's not relevant. That's totally unimportant. Reverend Edie, help me get back on message. But their coach at FAMU, he took the same team that was almost 1-11, and he's turned them around in one season. That's what a young man can do, inspiring other men. FAMU has a $2.4 million budget deficit, and they're having to cancel men's and women's tennis this year. So when I see the great Simone Biles do a double flip, half twist, somersault cart, a child that had to leave home because the resources weren't in her neighborhood to pursue gymnastics, when I see a Shawnee Davis that has to leave the south side to go to the north side to ice skate because there's no ice skating rinks on the south side, when I come to the west side, and I remember my good friend, Brother Isaiah Thomas, coming up over here having to wear his sister's boots and shoes that had perpetual homelessness. I can see Mark Aguirre. I can see Terry Cummins. I can see Glenn Doc Rivers. I know what the West Side can produce. I can see Darryl Stingley opening the door that made us all excited about sports on the West Side. But then when you go back to the same schools today, and see the football programs shut down, to see the tennis programs shut down. Our children have fewer ways to get out. It's time to fight back, ladies. Don't tell me you don't have a child in the school system. You may need to be in a nursing home. Well, guess what? You're going to wish one of these young children could read those prescriptions if you're sitting up in a nursing home. Why do we care about automotive? We need to have more than the ride. We need to raise our sights. This is the story of the unmerciful servant, Reverend Edie. The automobile industry was bailed out less than 10 years ago. How are we 50% fewer African American dealers after those that had lost the money have gotten bailed out? We're 50% fewer African American dealers. You see what's going on in D.C. regarding the Ukraine? Let me tell you how my mind works. I am trying to figure out, how did they get, with a no-look pass, $400 million sent to the Ukraine? Every day I've heard about this impeachment hearing, and every day I heard about that money that got approved. I'm trying to figure out, how did that money, Ms. Brown, not come to the Chicago Teachers Union and to the Chicago public school system? $400 million for the Ukraine, and our children are out of school for 2 weeks. Teachers deserve more pay. Our students are 50% living in poverty. Our athletic programs are closing. Our children's student loan debts is insurmountable, and we're sitting here acting cool. The unmerciful servant. Those that have been granted mercy. The markets crashed. Nobody wanted to lend to automotive. They had to go to the United States government, get an unsecured loan. The Treasury Department, the White House, the Congress, and the Senate got together and gave them, the Federal Reserve, all the money they needed. They were able to bankrupt the company, not pay the suppliers, not have to have a commitment to equity and fairness for black dealers. No, brothers and sisters, that's a bad deal. When you drive on the south side, no dealerships. Why? Now we got to go one step back. Not just the Ford and the automotive and the General Motors. Look back behind the curtain. The bankers that got bailed out, that overcharge us on interest rates. The insurance companies that overcharge us for the dealerships to go into our neighborhood. It's racism in economics. The rules that are written for our treasurer that she has to challenge, that we have to be a part and support her. The fiduciary rules state she can't invest money in our own neighborhoods because it's imprudent. The teachers' union money, the fire union money, the police union money, the custodian, they say that money is fiduciarily irresponsibly to be spent and invested in our own neighborhood, and they can put it in the Ukraine. Well, we can't get into it all today. And I've had a lot to say because I've missed you all so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had a very successful automotive summit, and one of our heroes, champions, has made his transition, the great Honorable Congressman John Conyers. I want to say one word about Mr. Conyers, the longest serving African American in the Congress in American history. A man whom Reverend Martin Luther King came to Detroit to campaign for, and he won by 108 votes. A man who's been on more significant progressive legislation than any congressperson in American history. He was the first person to proceed with trying to initiate impeachment proceedings against Richard Nixon. He was a fighter. He's a Korean War veteran. A man that when others wanted to riot and burn, he wanted to build. It was his idea when Reverend Martin Luther King was not popular to have a Reverend Martin Luther King national holiday. Now, some of you all are old enough to remember. Because on my birth certificate, I had to go look it up. Thank you, Ms. Brown, in your recorder's office. I had to fill out some minority certification papers to prove my ethnicity of Negroicity. And, you know, in the 70s, if somebody called you a black man, people would start wanting to fight. And if they called you an African man, you definitely were into a fight. He was trying to honor and extol the virtue of the Reverend Martin Luther King in the 60s. While some wanted to burn and riot, he wanted to build. And it wasn't until Stevland Morris, also known as Stevie Wonder, came out with the song Happy Birthday that galvanized all of our attention. What am I saying about Congressman John Conyers? He had a vision bigger than himself. He's one of the founders of the Congressional Black Caucus. And now there are 55 members, 3 in the Senate, 52 now. That's John Conyers. A man that had unmitigating gall and tenacity, a freedom fighter. Nah, he's no politician. I know a politician. I can smell one. John Conyers will go down in the annals of history, like Brother Bobby Rush, a statesman. What happened to the statesmen in American life? Those that fight for things bigger than themselves. When Mayor Dick Hatcher won in Gary, Indiana, what did he do? He wanted to have a national expo for black elected officials on telling them what was going to come their way. We need more statesmen to come from our community. We need more freedom fighters to pick up the mantle like Brandon and go to office and serve us better. We need more automotive inclusion so that we can have prosperity. We're not going to mellow in despair. And I thank God for my father, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, for having never altered, never wavered, for having stayed on mission in the work of Reverend Martin Luther King.